In the middle of the bustling town of Ada stood a church so magnificent that travelers stopped just to marvel at its beauty. The walls were painted cream white, the gates glistened like polished brass, and tall mango trees lined the compound like ancient guardians. To outsiders, the church looked like a symbol of joy and prosperity, but behind its holy walls, sadness lingered like a shadow. This was the home of Pastor Kelechi, a man respected by thousands. His voice carried power in sermons, his prayers drew crowds, and his influence stretched across villages. Yet in his private life, he bore a pain money power and faith seemed unable to erase. His only daughter, Adeza, once full of laughter, was now confined to a wheelchair. 2 years earlier, a fatal accident had claimed her mother's life and left Adeza's legs lifeless. The child who once ran in the courtyard now sat still, silent, and broken. Pastor Kelechi had prayed, fasted, and invited doctors from across the nation, but nothing changed. His heart ached as his daughter's joy drained away. Every night he wept behind closed doors, pleading with heaven to restore her. Far from the splendor of the church compound lived Obinna, the only son of Enana, a feared witch doctor in a nearby village. People whispered about his father's charms, his secret potions, and his midnight rituals. Children were warned never to go near his shrine, for it was said spirits lingered there. Yet Obinna, though born into such a dark heritage, was different. His mother had died when he was very small, and his father rarely showed him affection. Loneliness wrapped around his young heart like chains. But Obinna carried something no spell could destroy, an unusual gift. Whenever sadness overwhelmed him, he turned to rhythm. He would stomp his feet against the earth, sway his arms, and dance as though invisible drums guided him. The villagers laughed sometimes, saying the witch doctor's son was foolish. But for Obinna, dancing was survival. It lifted the heavy silence of his father's compound and brought warmth to his cold nights. He did not dance for money, nor to impress. He danced to breathe, to forget his father's darkness, and to remind himself that joy could still exist. Little did he know, his gift would one day cross paths with Adeza, the grieving daughter of the pastor. One scorching afternoon, Obinna wandered into the town of Ede. His stomach growled from hunger, his lips were dry, and dust clung to his bare feet. He walked past the markets, past rows of yam sellers and spice traders, searching for scraps of food. As he reached the towering church, something caught his eyes. Through the iron bars of the golden gate, he saw a young girl seated in a wheelchair. Her hands rested weakly on her lap, her eyes gazed into the distance, empty and clouded with sorrow. Obinna paused. His hunger was forgotten. He whispered to himself, "She is surrounded by wealth, yet her face looks emptier than mine." For a moment their worlds collided, one bound by sickness, the other by loneliness. Obinna thought of how dancing always lifted his pain. Perhaps if he danced for her, she too might smile again. Looking around, he noticed the guards were distracted, standing far away near the church entrance. At the side wall, he spotted a small gap where bricks had fallen out. Without hesitation, he squeezed his skinny body through the opening. With soft steps, he approached Adeza. She turned, startled by the sight of a strange boy with ragged clothes and piercing eyes. At first, fear flashed across Adeza's face. Who was this boy, barefoot, dusty, and looking nothing like the polished children who visited the church compound? Before she could scream, Obinna bowed low and said, "Please don't be afraid. I came not to harm you. I only want to make you smile." Adez frowned in disbelief. How could a boy from the streets bring her joy when doctors, prayers, and riches had failed? Yet something about his trembling voice and sincere eyes held her still. Obinna took a step back, raised his arms, and began to move. Slowly at first, he bent low, swayed, and twisted with grace. Then his rhythm quickened, his feet stamped against the earth, his body spun like wind, his arms waved like branches in a storm. He danced with such freedom that Adeza's lips quivered. She had not smiled in years, but now laughter slipped out like sunlight breaking through clouds. She clapped her hands, crying out, "Again! Do it again!" Obinna spun faster, his movements raw but alive. Adeza's laughter echoed across the compound, filling spaces that had long been silent. For the first time in 2 years, joy returned to the pastor's home. Inside his study, Pastor Kalechi sat hunched over a Bible and sermon notes. His mind was troubled, heavy with thoughts of his daughter. Suddenly, a sound pierced the silence. Laughter, familiar yet forgotten like music from the past. He froze. Could it be? Rushing to the window, his eyes widened. There was a Daisy, clapping and laughing in her wheelchair, while a ragged boy spun, stamped, and danced before her. Joy washed over him for a split second, then fear and anger surged. Who was this intruder? "Guards! Guards!" his voice thundered. He stormed into the garden, fury written on his face. "How dare you sneak into my compound?" The guards moved toward Obinna, who fell to his knees, trembling. But before they could seize him, Adiza shouted, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Father, no! Don't hurt him! He makes me happy, can't you see? His dance gave me laughter again." The pastor froze. For 2 years, no doctor, no preacher, no medicine had achieved what this barefoot boy just did. His heart battled between suspicion and awe. He looked at Obinna again, dusty, poor, trembling. But beneath the dirt was courage, kindness, and a strange light. Something told him this meeting was no accident. Pastor Kalechi's voice shook with both authority and curiosity. "Boy, who are you? Speak truthfully." Obinna bowed his head, his words tumbling like a river. "My name is Obinna. I am son of Nana, the witch doctor of Umuni village. My mother is gone and my father cares little for me. I often sleep in the shrine, hungry and alone. But when sorrow becomes too heavy, I dance. Dancing is my only friend. Today, when I saw your daughter's sorrow, I remembered my own. I thought maybe if I dance for her, she will smile like I do when I dance. Forgive me, sir, for entering without permission. I meant no harm." The garden grew still. Even the guards paused. Adiz clutched her father's arm, sobbing, "He speaks truth, father. You have spent much, but I never laughed until today. Please don't send him away." Pastor Kalechi stared at the boy, torn between fear of his background and the miracle he had just witnessed. Slowly, his hardened face softened. "Obinna," he said gently, "you gave my daughter what I could not buy. Happiness. For that you will not be punished. Your story begins anew today." That night, for the first time in years, Daisy slept with a smile on her face. In her dreams, she saw herself running again, chasing butterflies across the churchyard, her mother's laughter echoing in the background. Meanwhile, Obinna lay on a mat in one of the guest rooms, staring at the ceiling. The soft bed felt like heaven compared to the cold ground of his father's shrine. At first, he feared it was a dream that would vanish at dawn. But when the smell of hot bread and tea drifted through the air the next morning, he knew it was real. He ate until his stomach was full, something he had not experienced in a long time. When he stepped into the garden, Adeza was already waiting, her face brighter than the sun. "Dance for me again," she said, her voice eager. And so, Obinna danced, not with sorrow this time, but with joy. Every step he took, Adeza's laughter grew louder. The maids clapped, the guards smiled, and the entire compound came alive with cheer. Pastor Kalechi watched quietly from a distance, his heart both grateful and uneasy. He could not deny the joy Obinna brought, yet questions lingered. Was this truly God's plan? Days turned into weeks, and Obinna became a permanent figure in the pastor's household. Every morning and evening he danced for Adeza, and with each performance, her spirit grew stronger. The once silent church compound now rang with laughter, songs, and clapping hands. Even strangers passing by stopped to listen, whispering, "Something has changed in Pastor Kalechi's home." But something greater was happening. Something hidden at first. Each time Obinna danced, Adeza began to feel small sparks in her legs. At first it was only a tingling like tiny ants crawling across her toes. She kept it to herself, thinking it was only her imagination. But slowly the feeling grew stronger. One morning, while Obinna spun in a circle and clapped, Adeza gasped. "I felt it, my toes moved." The maids dropped their brooms, the guards straightened in shock, and Obina froze mid-dance, his eyes wide. Pastor Kelechi rushed into the garden, trembling with disbelief. Indeed, his daughter's toes wiggled for the first time in 2 years. Tears filled his eyes as he fell to his knees, whispering, "Thank you, Lord." Adeze wept too, clutching her legs, her heart pounding with hope. Something miraculous was stirring, and everyone could feel it. From that day onward, Adeze worked harder. Each time Obina danced, she tried to push her legs against the ground. At first they trembled like weak branches in the wind. The effort left her exhausted, but she refused to give up. The household watched with bated breath as the girl who had once been declared hopeless began to fight for her strength again. Pastor Kelechi, once doubtful, now believed that Obina's presence was not an accident, but divine. God works in mysterious ways, he whispered often as he prayed. Then, one fateful morning, the miracle unfolded. Obina danced with more joy than ever before, stamping, twirling, and moving with fierce energy. Adeze gripped the arms of her wheelchair, her body trembling with determination. Suddenly, with tears streaming down her cheeks, she cried out, "I will stand!" And slowly, shakily, painfully, she rose to her feet. The maids screamed, the guards shouted, and Pastor Kelechi fell flat on the ground, weeping like a child. Adeze took one step, then another, then another. The wheelchair was behind her. She was walking on her own 2 legs. She threw herself into her father's arms, both of them sobbing uncontrollably. The church compound shook with shouts of joy. The news spread like wildfire. From the church compound to the streets, from the market to the entire town, everyone heard the same story. The pastor's daughter can walk again. Crowds gathered at the gates, singing and clapping while children danced in the streets. Women ululated, men beat drums, and even strangers celebrated the miracle. Doctors who had once declared Adeze's condition impossible hurried to see for themselves. They pinched her toes, tested her balance, and asked her to walk. When she took step after step before their eyes, they shook their heads in disbelief. "This is beyond medicine," they whispered. "This is a miracle." Pastor Kelechi, overwhelmed with gratitude, announced a great feast. Cows were slaughtered, pots of rice were cooked, and palm wine flowed freely. Musicians filled the compound, drums thundered, and songs of praise rose into the sky. At the center of it all stood Adeze, walking gracefully, sometimes even dancing beside Obina. The crowd cheered until their voices grew hoarse. No one could deny that something extraordinary had happened, and Obina, once the lonely son of a witch doctor, was now celebrated as the boy who brought light to a pastor's household. As the celebration reached its peak, Pastor Kelechi lifted his hand, and silence fell across the crowd. His voice rang with authority and emotion. "Listen, all of you. For years I carried wealth, influence, and faith, but none of it healed my daughter. Doctors from near and far tried, but they failed. Yet this boy, this son of a man known only for darkness, brought back my daughter's laughter, with nothing but his gift of dance. Through that joy, a miracle was born." He turned to Obina, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "From today, this boy is no longer a stranger. He is no longer the son of a witch doctor in the shadows. He is my son, Adeze's brother, and a part of this family." The crowd erupted into cheers, clapping and shouting in agreement. Tears streamed down Obina's face as he bowed his head. For the first time in his life, he felt truly loved and accepted. The boy who once danced alone in sorrow was now embraced by a family and a community. His gift had turned despair into hope, sorrow into laughter, and faith into miracle. And his story would never be forgotten. In the weeks that followed, Obina's life transformed completely. No longer bound to the dark shrine of his father, he now lived in a place filled with light, love, and laughter. Adeze's strength grew daily. Soon she could run again, her joy bubbling like a spring. Together she and Obina became inseparable, often dancing in the courtyard while the entire compound watched with delight. Pastor Kelechi would stand in quiet corners, smiling as he whispered prayers of thanksgiving. People across the town retold the story, always ending with the same lesson. No matter where you come from, your gift can change lives. Joy can heal where wealth and power fail. Kindness can bring light where darkness reigns. And so the witch doctor's son, who once carried the burden of rejection, became a symbol of hope for all. Obina's dance was no longer just a way to survive. It became a testimony, a miracle, a living story. Whenever people saw him, they remembered that light can rise from the darkest places, and that sometimes the simplest gift is greater than all the riches in the world.